Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about the natal chart of Ma'Khia Bryant. I don't have a time of birth for her, but I had to improvise once again into a solar/sunrise chart in which I put the sun at the same spot as the ascendant. As far as what I got, or the source I got this from was kind of an odd source. A little bit unorthodox, but this was on the Chris Cuomo primetime show on CNN, which aired on April 22nd, 2021. What it was is he had Chris Cuomo had Ma'Khia Bryant's mother on the show, Paula Bryant, and Paula Bryant was wearing it was on a COVID mask, had the birth date listed on it, listed the date she was born, and to the to then dash, and then the date she was murdered, and the date of birth read 9/29/2004. So that is the date I'm using on this, and because that was the date that was shown on the mask. And anyway, of course, that puts her sun in Libra, puts her moon in Aries, and you have a lot of that energy. Of course, is diametrically opposed. The sun, um, Libra, of course, basic character being very refined, docile, peaceful, wanting a compromise negotiation. But then you have the moon in Aries, adversarial to it, which of course on more of a subconscious level can be a little bit more combative and acrimonious, and a little bit more contentious natured, more courageous. But but what's interesting is that Paula Bryant had stated that she was she was a single mother, and at the time she had five children. Now, and sadly, she of course stated that it's four because of Ma'Khia Bryant perishing. And I look at Ma'Khia Bryant's chart based on the solar sunrise time. Saturn is squaring the moon, and when you have Saturn an adverse aspect to the moon, it could often indicate a separation of the parent. She also has Saturn, which is it's in its detriment in the zodiac sign Cancer, and it's close to the critical 26 degree. And the solar sunrise chart also falls in the 10th house, and Saturn in the 10th house by itself can sometimes manifest in some kind of restriction connected with the dominant parent, which is often the father. And again, Saturn is also in its detriment in Cancer. And the thing about, and also, look at the chart as well. Is you figure, she was, sadly she was shot. Ma'Khia Bryant was shot 4 times, and died. And transit I noticed is that she had Pluto, transit Pluto in the 4th house in the solar/sunrise chart. That could be at the end of life coming through, a murder. Another thing I noticed in transit as well is that transit Sun in Taurus was conjunct her natal North Node in Taurus at this time. And when you're talking about transits that involve the North Node, they can manifest in some cases as issues one may have to confront. Remember that the Sun is associated with life. North Node again could be about issues one may have to address or confront. Being in Taurus, it could have been a life that may have actually had some stability, peace, and tranquility in it. This was in one which had maybe a lot of creature comforts for her, and things that were just a life where it was about a lot of values, and it's sad that something like this had to come to an end so abruptly. But another thing I'm looking at as far as her natal chart, solar/sunrise chart, there's three planets in Libra in the 12th house. 12th house can be associated as a house of endings. It puts Mars in that 12th house in Libra. Mars being in its detriment in Libra and being in the 12th house of restrictions and self-undoing. Mars in Libra can indicate arguments, contentious situations, over what's fair, equitable, justice. This is also, it might even been when she was shot, because keep in mind that Mars is associated with physical injury. I don't know exactly where she was shot, but this could have been one of the bullets may have hit her lower back or maybe a kidney area, because Libra is associated with that and Mars is associated with gunfire. She also, this could be, remember that Mars can be adversarial as well, having Mars in Libra. This might have been, she might have been a situation, maybe she's been embroiled in others previously. That would be adversarial to negotiation and compromise, and sadly, and then when you have the Sun conjunct Mars in astrology, the fact, I understand her Sun, being in Libra, can be a focus on compromise. It can be on in being peaceful, diplomatic, tactful, wanting to compromise, want reconciliation. But when you have Mars conjunct with the Sun, it can modify that a little, and the person, basic character may be a little bit more combative, coupled again with that Moon in acrimonious Aries, which can have a very fiery temperament, and it can come out when maybe somebody is ordering her or being dictatorial. This is something too. She also has Jupiter conjunct Mars in her chart, which could further. Jupiter, as I've talked about in previous videos, could be rather paradoxical. Could be very strongly benign, benevolent, but could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. Jupiter conjunct Mars can exacerbate volatile, energy and escalated violence. Now another thing, looking at her chart is what I've noticed too. In a transit, she also had transit Saturn conjunct her natal Neptune. It was a fairly tight conjunction, and you have transit like that can manifest in feeling alone, desolate. It can distort fears. It can be about imagined fears. Being an Aquarius, it could be matters with groups or clubs or organizations or societies. In some cases, Saturn is also that sad, melancholy planet. So maybe it might have been causing, I don't know this for a fact, maybe it was causing some isolation issues with her at this time. But the thing about this too, what I notice as well in her chart, she also has Capricorn. When you have, the solar sunrise chart, Capricorn falls on the 4th house cusp of the end of life, which could indicate that the end of life might have some kind of restrictions with it, or might be more sorrow and sadness and despondency associated with it. It was connected with somebody in authority. She also has Chiron, puts Chiron in Capricorn in that 4th house as well, so that could indicate more wounds and suffering in matters at the latter end part of life, which is more, again, Saturn being connected with despondency, maybe feeling where it causes more feelings of melancholy, or feeling more melancholy, and also being in Capricorn, the sign associated with authority. It can be, also, again, transit Pluto is in that 4th house as well, which could be, as I was stating earlier, reiterate that at the end of life might come through something, through murder. She also had, this as well, the end of life, the ruler of the 4th house of end of life falls in the 10th house of notoriety, exposure, and recognition. So that is something where, I mean, where it's an indicator that the end of life was garnered a lot of attention. Hold on a moment, people. And another thing I'm looking at as well is that looking at Taurus being on the cusp of the eighth house in the solar sunrise chart, it puts the ruler, Venus, in the 11th house. Eighth house, of course, is associated with death. For death, 11th house can be connected with the internet and social media. The ruler Venus in Leo, in dramatic Leo, it's not surprising that this was a death that had obviously a lot of drama and fierce energy, to say the absolute least. And um, trying to see if there's anything else that's looking at the chart that can be connected. Transits, natal placements that might be tied into her passing. Well, she also in her natal in the solar sunrise chart, I should say, Pluto is in the third house, which could suggest a death that might come, through neighbors, or some involvement with neighbors or in the neighborhood, which is what took place. And she also has, and Pluto is in Sagittarius. I understand Pluto is generational planet, but Sagittarius is associated with the law, and it's really not much else. Looking at her chart, might be as far as transits, I say, or natal placements that might be tied into her passing. The only other one thing I have to notice though is that she does have transit Chiron is in that seventh house in Aries, and the seventh Chiron can be associated with wounds, sometimes physical ones. It's in Aries, and Aries is associated with gunfire. It's in the seventh house, which is connected with, it can have connection with the law, and I would say law enforcement as well. So this is just again, it's just a terrible, I mean, a tragedy that took place, and a passing that probably shouldn't have happened. But we have to understand, people, that the officer did make a split-second decision. There's a lot of controversy over whether he should have shot her 4 times. Maybe that could be seen as a little excessive, but officers in that situation have to make an instantaneous decision. They were showing, there was some footage, I believe it was last night on Cuomo Prime Time, where they were showing an officer that was able to defuse a situation or subdue the perpetrator that had a knife by just basically, physically, just getting it, subduing him, and getting him to stop the person from potentially stabbing somebody by some kind of physical restraint, which didn't require I don't think it may not have required the use of a weapon. But in that example, the officer was, it looked like, in closer proximity to the perpetrator. When Ma'Khia Bryant was shot, people got to understand the officer was at still at a fairly good distance from her. And I think what the officer probably was thinking was that he didn't think, based on his judgment at the time, he determined that he wasn't going to be able to grab, the arm that had the knife in it from Ma'Khia Bryant before she could have potentially stabbed that other girl. And I think that's what led ultimately to his decision to fire. And people have also talked about the taser being used, and they made some, I was watching something that had made some good points on it, that when you try to tase somebody, you do have to have, I believe, both prongs coming out of it and making contact with that person, the perpetrator, to in order for it to be effective, in order for it to actually potentially be effective. And some of you may have noticed that, we've watched a show when Cops was on, I'm sure you might have seen it on other shows, that when the tasers are not 100% effective on certain people, Some people will continue, a violent, action or tirade, whatever you want to call it, and they won't be subdued or knocked down after getting hit with the taser, and they'll still keep going in some instances. So it's not like, taser is not perfect or infallible in terms of subduing the person, or stopping them from doing what they're doing. So you have to understand, I guess maybe I've seen this from the devil's advocate perspective, why maybe she was actually shot. Now, 4 times may have been a little excessive, though. One shot might have been enough, 1 or 2 shots might have been enough to subdue her and maybe prevent her from actually dying. But anyway, and what I want to offer as well, I said this in a previous video, but I'm going to say it in this one as well, that I do offer my condolences and prayers to the family and close friends of Ma'Khia Bryant. This is Edwin Learnard. Until next time, people, stay well.